But who should take care of the resources that we all share, such as the air we breathe? I want to push you one more time on the environment. Air. Here in California, it turns out there are 30 million people who like to breathe. And we have, particularly in the LA basin, smog beginning in the 1970s, that the environmental movement begins to...
Oh, no, the smog went back 200 years. There are stories of the Indians describing that as a smoggy area.
So part of what's going on is
natural. But no doubt, the thing about that is there is an argument for government requiring those who impose costs on third parties to pay for them. And the point is, with respect to smog, the efficient way to do it is to use the market.
How do you create property rights in the air, say?
Well, you do it now by selling the right to emit a certain amount of pollutants into the air. You now have a market in effluent rights.
For large manufacturing concerns.
For manufacturing concerns, which is where most of it comes from. And you do the same by charging, essentially making it a requirement that automobiles have to have
catalytic converters.
Well, and that's effectively making individuals be responsible for costs they impose on others. Remember, what I said is the key feature of a libertarian view is that you should be free to do what you want, provided you don't prevent other people from doing the same thing. Okay. And so the only case for government is when it is not feasible for market arrangements to make individuals compensate others for any harm they impose on them. If you and I enter into an agreement to buy or sell something, well, that's our businesses.
Right.
You may lose, I may lose, or more likely we're both going to win. We're not going to enter into it unless both of us think it's better for us. But there are cases like the power plant that emits smoke that dirties my shirt, in which the company is imposing a cost on me for which I'm not being compensated. Those are the only cases. But you have to qualify that by noting that when government enters in, it also is emitting smoke. It's also imposing costs on third parties, because it's always a very imperfect arrangement. And moreover, it always has to collect taxes. And in the process of collecting taxes, it's, as I always say, there's a smokestack on the back of every government program.
A smokestack on the back of every government program. By that you mean a distortion in the marketplace.
And imposing a cost on third parties for which the third parties are not compensated.
And so the key characteristic in which you find a circumstance where it's legitimate for the government to intervene would typically be where property rights are vague or diffuse. Is that correct?
And where it's almost impossible to make them precise. That is a problem in the case of the power plant.
All right.
Is that there's no way in which you can say you have to get the agreement of each of the persons whose shirt you're going to dirty, and pay them for the privilege of dirtying their shirts before you can do it.
So, on the environment, the Greens actually do have a point. That is one area where there is a strong case.
But in most cases, in practice, when you look at it, and there are some people up at PERC, as you know, who have Terry Anderson, who I'm sure has been on your program.
That's right.
Who have demonstrated that there are many, many cases in which market arrangements are far more effective than command and control arrangements.
All right, so now we've got a little bit of a... But there must be some areas, food and drugs, for example, where public safety can only be ensured through government involvement, right? The Food and Drug Administration, which regulates everything from the drugs that pharmaceutical companies may put on the market to the ingredients in items that we'd purchase off the grocery store shelves. Let me give you an example. Thalidomide. Thalidomide, marketed in the...
Everybody's favorite example.
Well, I may be leading with my chin on this one, but I'm going to lead with it anyway. 50s and 60s, it is marketed in Europe as a drug to help women get through the nausea that they sometimes experience during pregnancy. The Food and Drug Administration said it had been inadequately tested in the United States and forbade it to be marketed in this country, with the result that thousands of children were born with horrible birth defects in Europe to mothers who had used thalidomide, but that didn't happen to American children
That is
because
true.
the FDA had intervened and kept that drug off the market. Thank God for the FDA, right?
Wrong.
All right, why?
This is a case in which they did save lives. This was a good case. But I suppose they are equally slow in adopting a drug which turns out to be very good and very beneficial. How would you ever see the lives that are lost because of that? You're an FDA official.
Right.
You have a question of whether to approve or disapprove a new drug. If you approve it, and it turns out to be a bad drug like thalidomide, you're in the soup. Your name's going to be on every front
Cost me
page.
my job. I get hauled up to
Right.
Congress to testify. Right.
On the other hand, if you disapprove it, but it turns out to be good, well, then later on you approve it 4 or 5 years later. Nobody is going to complain about the fact that you didn't prove it earlier, except those greedy pharmaceutical companies that want to make profits at the expense of the public, as the saying as everybody will say. And so the result is that the pressure on the FDA is always to be late in approving. And there is enormous evidence that they have caused more deaths by their late approvals than they have saved by their early approvals.
So your view is abolish the FDA.
Absolutely.
And what comes up
What
in
comes
its
up
place?
is it's in the self-interest of pharmaceutical companies not to have these bad things. Do you think the manufacturer of thalidomide made a profit out of thalidomide or lost?
I see. Okay.
And you have to have, people should be responsible for harm that they do. It should have been possible.
So tort law takes care of a lot of this.
Absolutely.
All right. If Lilly or Merck or somebody else comes up with a drug that does me harm, I go after them. I join a class action with everybody else who's taken that pill, and we sue them for billions of dollars and wipe out their shareholders' equity.
Absolutely. And
Seeing that, they have every interest to
Right.
be extremely rigorous in testing that drug before they make it available.
Let me give you a different example.
All right.
The rules imposed on airlines for
Right.
safety, supposedly.
Right.
Who has the most interest in preventing airline accidents?
After the passenger themselves, the airlines.
Well, it's not even clear that the passengers have more interest in the airline.
All right.
Because included in the passengers are the pilots.
Right, of course.
Why is the government going to improve airline safety? How are they going to do it? How do they add any incentive to anybody to improve airline safety?
So far as I